I think we have the council on, and see Mr. Gilbertson and the witness. Can you hear me?
Can hear you.
Okay. First of all, I want to thank everyone for accommodating me today. I'm sorry for the change in the schedule. Before we begin the testimony, let me just say there's still 18 exhibits that were objected to that I'll try to get at the end of the testimony today, how I tend to deal with those. And then at the end, we can discuss a schedule for the written closings, if that's okay.
Yes.
Okay. So who do we have today? We have Ms. Newman.
We have Jim Mathieu.
Right. And we have, I'll make sure I've got this. I've got both Mr. Wright and Mr. Anaker on. Do you know which one of you will be doing cross-examination?
Carol Anaker will be doing that.
Okay, thank you. We'll try to avoid calling him Mr. Pierce Wright at various times. Is there anything else preliminary that you want to discuss before we have Mr. Mathieu testify?
Not appellants.
Not from the port.
Okay, why don't we begin with him? I better silence my phone. I'm sorry.
Okay.
There he is. Mr. Mathieu, my name is Robert Mack. I'm the hearing examiner. You're going to be testifying. I'm going to ask you to please raise your right hand. Do you affirm that you will tell the truth and nothing but the truth at the hearing today?
I do affirm that, yes.
Okay, very good. Ms. Newman, why don't you begin?
Thank you, Mr. Mathieu.
Go ahead.
Can you state and spell your name for the record?
Yeah, my proper name is James Thomas Mathieu Jr., and that last name is spelled Mathieu.
And what's your professional title and organization?
I'm a professional hydrogeologist and a professional geologist, and I work for a firm called Northwest Land and Water Incorporated. I'm the principal hydrogeologist here.
And how long have you been working in the field of hydrogeology?
Over 30 years. Let's just say 30 plus.
Okay, can you describe your educational background?
Yeah, I have a bachelor's degree in geological sciences from the University of California at Santa Barbara. And I have a master's degree from in hydrology and water resources from the University of Arizona.
And Mr. Examiner, Exhibit 63 is his CV. So we have that already in the record. I don't believe that's been objected to, so that's officially in the record.
That's been admitted.
Okay, thank you.
I think before you begin or begin again, I think there are 3 unadmitted exhibits that I think he may have authored that you'll probably ask him about, and so I can rule on those at that time.
That's right. Yeah, thank you. Could you describe the types of projects that you've worked on as a professional hydrogeologist?
Yes, Ms. Newman, I put it in 2 buckets just to make it simplified. I've worked on a lot more strategic level plans, comprehensive plans, water system plans, watershed scale plans in my recent years. Probably due to the fact that I'm an aging hydrogeologist with a lot of experience. And but I also have done a lot of what I call the nuts and bolts of hydrogeology, more tactical work. So that would be designing wells, designing monitoring systems, running models, and doing really on the ground in the field work.
Have you performed work in Thurston County?
Yes, in fact, I would say the majority of my career over the last 30 years has been in Thurston County. And in particular, I've done a lot of wellhead protection plans, water comprehensive plans, and other strategic plans for the cities of Lacey, the city of Olympia, and I've even done some work with the city of Tumwater. I'll talk about that in a minute. And then I've done a lot of well design and construction for cities and the county in Thurston County. And so, yeah, I'm very familiar with the setting, the hydrogeologic setting, and some of the dynamics of getting water to people or protecting water for people in that area. There's one thing in particular, and I want to point this out, Mr. Examiner, because I think it's very important, very relevant. In the early 1990s, when I was a much younger person working for a firm out of Seattle here, I was called to sample water from the Palermo well field, which is owned and operated by the City of Tumwater. And this was, we didn't really understand what was going on at this well field, but there was some indication that there might have been some contamination of those wells. And sure enough, the samples came back with concentrations of what we call organic compounds, contaminants, in particular, a chemical called PCE and TCE. And it turns out that the source of these contaminants was probably 2 locations just uphill and up gradient from the wells, about a half a mile away. One was a dry cleaners, and the other was a washed-out facility. I'm bringing this up because this experience is really the testimony to why this hydrogeologic setting, and in particular, this airport area that we're talking about, is so vulnerable to contamination and does need a lot of attention and scrutiny for any new activities or new developments that are occurring. Anyway, that Palermo contamination set off a whole slew of activity. That site became a US EPA Superfund site. 30 years later, it's still being dealt with, either with remediation on site or trying to clean up the soil and groundwater that was contaminated. It really caused a lot of turmoil, and I think it sparked the city of Tumwater to look for other sources of water, in addition to the fact that they were growing in population over the last 3 decades. But it actually pushed and I think drove some of the development of the new wells that are the newer wells for the city, like the Bush wells, which actually now derive a lot of their water from aquifers that are beneath the Olympia airport. So anyway, I just wanted to point that out. That's
Okay.
that's a really critical experience that I've had.
Were the Palermo wells public supply wells?
Yes, they are.
And
They were and they still are.
what was the population of the city of Tumwater that those wells served? Do you know?
Ms. Newman, I'm
Roughly?
not sure of the exact numbers, but it was on the order of, tens of thousands back in the 1990s. It has
Mhm.
definitely grown since then.
Okay. Now turning to this project, are you familiar with the Olympia Airport Master Plan update, which is the subject of this appeal?
Yes, I am.
And have you reviewed the SEPA environmental checklist and MDNS?
Yes, I have.
And you prepared a report for this hearing, Mr. Examiner, that's Exhibit 34, and I'd like to offer that as an exhibit.
Right, that's been objected to. Mr. Anakar, I assume your objection continues or not?
Sorry about that. Forgot about the muting.
That's
Yes,
okay.
our objection is specifically to, and let me just bring it up for my own reference, but it's to the sections of the report or letter which deal with species and the impacts on specific species and the habitats and just general ecology of those species. Here we go. Habitat for species of concern, starting on page 9 and continuing through, it appears, page 13. We are objecting to those sections in particular because Mr. Mathieu at least has not yet established credentials for being a wildlife biologist, ecologist, or any related field.
Okay, I'll do this. Ms. Newman, you can respond if you want. I'm going to admit the exhibit and rely on it to support his testimony on geological and hydrological issues. And I'll indicate in the record he's not an expert on as far as I know, on, although he may have opinions on wildlife issues or issues related to that.
And can I elaborate a bit with the witness on how being a hydrogeologist does provide important information related to habitat?
You may. I've admitted the exhibit.
Okay.
If he's talking about issues in the exhibit dealing with that, you can ask him about that and he'll be cross-examined as whether that's directly within his area of expertise or of course he deals with the issues. I mean, I'm familiar with hydrologists and geohydrologists and sort of how far the other issues that their work touches on. So I realize it may touch on other specialties, but I'm not any remarks in the exhibit that you could say as an expert on those issues. I'm not going to rely on, but I've admitted the exhibit. If you want to ask him about
Okay, thank you.
sections, fine.
I think, Mr. Mathieu, we may address this as we proceed and talk about impacts related to your expertise to that habitat.
This is exhibit 35.
Exhibit 34.
34, okay. Go ahead.
Can you give us just a big picture idea of what resources are impacted by the hydrologic change, by any hydrologic changes at the airport?
Yes. So the big picture is that there are significant municipal water wells in the vicinity of the airport, which draw water from beneath the airport. And the concern that I have is related to that first issue that I just brought up, Mr. Examiner, about the potential for there to be contamination and the generation of contaminants, the storage and release and generation of contaminants, from any activities at the airport, on the airport property. That's a very large concern, okay, because you don't want to take out a municipal supply well that's supplying, tens of thousands of people. There are also, to the east of the airport, there's a lot of domestic and small water system wells that could equally be, harmed by a release of contaminants. Now, on the other side of this is water quantity and the water flow issues. And this is where we get into the habitat. Habitat for for the birds and the gopher, for the Oregon spotted frog, and for fish in the Deschutes River are very much tied to water, okay? And any changes or alterations in the hydrologic or hydraulic processes that occur at the airport property could and potentially will impact all these habitats and these species. Some of these species are listed as endangered species as well. So that's sort of the big picture.
Okay.
And we got to remember that when we talk about habitat for these species, and yes, I'm not a biologist, but when we talk about the habitat, water is an integral part of that habitat. Thus, I do feel qualified to talk about the water issues in those habitats. Okay.
Okay, so we will get into that in a little more detail. But before I do that, I'd like to ask you, from your report, you explain as background that the airport property overlies an aquifer that serves as the drinking water reservoir for these tens of thousands of Tumwater and Thurston County residents. Can you describe that aquifer?
Yes, that aquifer is basically a large sand and gravel deposit that was placed here by the glaciers that moved through here 10,000 years ago. And we call that aquifer an advanced outwash aquifer, and there is an exhibit, Ms. Newman, that we have in our report. I think it's on page 4, figure 1. So it's exhibit
Okay.
34. It might be instructive to look at that. It's a cross section, like a vertical slice through the earth. Okay.
Can you see the screen?
Yeah, I can see the screen. Yes, right there. Okay, that's the figure 1 that I'm talking about. So, Mr. Examiner, what we're showing here, this is a cross section was developed by another consultant for the City of Tumwater for their wellhead protection plan report. And what I want to point out to you in this figure is that there's a set of wells, and so you can see that they're labeled the port well field and then the bush well field in kind of a gray color, and then there's a SW southwest well field. Those wells penetrate the ground and the subsurface and are completed in their well screens are completed in that unit we call the QGA. Hopefully you can see that, Mr. Examiner. I know that the type is a little bit small, but it's that blue sort of pattern that looks like a bunch of sand and gravel. Yeah, thank you, Ms. Newman. And that QGA is the aquifer that basically stores and allows groundwater movement to occur and to flow and move towards those wells. The bush, you can see that bush PW-12 well that's shown on there. Yep. And the key thing here is this is a very shallow aquifer. In other words, it's close to the ground surface. The top of that aquifer is anywhere from, say, 20 to 50 feet below ground surface. Okay. Now, above that aquifer is a very thin layer, what we call a till layer. And a till layer is something that gets overrun by a glacier and is usually a little more compact. This particular till layer in this region, we know, is also quite leaky. In other words, it can allow vertical flow of water from ground surface into that aquifer. And then above that till layer is a very coarse, sandy material. You can see here it's labeled QGOS, okay? So, all that to say, there's not a lot of protection of the water quality in that QGA aquifer, which is the main production aquifer for the City of Tumwater and a lot of Thurston County residents too. So there has to be a lot of care and scrutiny of any activities that occur on the surface. Unlike that situation that I described in the early 1990s, probably the late 80s and early 1990s, where there was this release of these chemicals that basically took out half of the city's Palermo well field, which is not shown on this diagram. But anyway,
Is this aquifer the sole source of water for residents in the city of Tumwater?
Right now, it is predominantly the main sole source of water for the city of Tumwater and for hundreds of other residents in Thurston County. When I say right now, Tumwater is involved in developing other water resources elsewhere, but that's some years off.
Okay. And you mentioned that the entire airport property in your report lies within a Category 1 critical aquifer recharge area. What is that? A Category 1
Well,
CARA.
yeah, that is a category that has been designated by the state to basically recommend or drive the highest level of protection from water quality impacts, from contamination. Okay. I think the Growth Management Act defines it as areas with a critical recharging effect on aquifers used for potable water, for drinking water. And it includes areas where an aquifer is a source of drinking water and is very vulnerable to contamination that would affect that potability, that ability to serve that water to the public. It's an area that's very susceptible to impacts from ground surface activities.
Okay.
They often,
And
yeah,
yeah.
those CARA areas are often characterized by highly permeable soils and very shallow water tables too, which is the situation that we have here.
Okay.
Could I interrupt for a moment?
Yeah.
Sure.
You use the term, and it's on this page, I think. It says leaky, and you use quite leaky. Is that equal to highly permeable?
Exactly, Mr. Examiner.
Okay.
Yes. If it's leaky, it's permeable and highly permeable. Yes.
I just hadn't. Okay, I understand. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen again because I want to use from your report this figure 2. Can you, using this figure, describe the groundwater flow patterns of the airport and the city of Tumwater?
Yes. So I know, Mr. Examiner, this looks like a bunch of squiggly lines, but this is very meaningful to people like me and hydrogeologists who look at maps. So we're looking at a map view. We're showing the footprint of the airport, which I think has been pulled from the master plan, the plan, the airport's current plan. And these dark black squiggly lines are basically what we call groundwater elevation contours. And we use these contours to try and figure out what is the flow pattern of the groundwater beneath the surface. Okay. And what this map shows, it shows two very distinct things here. In the vicinity of the airport, when water actually falls from as rainfall and hits the ground and goes into the aquifer, it will move in many different directions. Well, a couple general directions. One direction is down gradient, so from higher elevation groundwater contours to lower elevation. And you can see to the east and northeast of the airport footprint on there that the contours are showing that groundwater would move down gradient, down those contours, perpendicular to those contours in general, and towards the Deschutes River. And
can I just, while we're, just to make sure, because I don't think it's marked on here, is the Deschutes River this blue meandering line along kind of the east side of the image?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it is. Thank you.
So, Ms. Newman, I hesitate to interrupt, but I just, if I ask the witness, I assumed, and probably incorrectly based on your testimony, that the numbers in black on the contour lines are surface elevation contour numbers representing feet. Is that incorrect, or are they measuring something under the ground?
That is incorrect. They are measuring something under the ground. They're measuring if you were to put sink a well in the ground,
Correct.
like a monitoring well, and I'm not talking about a pumping well. If you sink a well in the ground, the water level in the aquifer, and this is for the main aquifer, the QGA aquifer, the water level in that aquifer would rise to that elevation in that well that you're using as a measuring point, as a measuring device for finding out what the height of the water level is in that aquifer. So yes, you're correct, Mr. Examiner. This is something underground. These are not ground surface contours. These are the contours of the water level surface in the aquifer. Okay.
The top of the water level in that aquifer.
Yes. Yep. The uppermost the highest water level, the water level that would rise to a certain elevation in that well that's sunk into the ground. Okay. And this gives us an idea of which way groundwater is flowing, because groundwater flows in an aquifer. It's not just a static bathtub. Okay.
So, Ms. Newman, again, I'm sorry, but I'm trying to understand this. So is this based on well log information?
This is based on well log information and a groundwater model that the Thurston County Health Department has developed, which was actually started by the U.S. Geological Survey back in the 1990s.
Mm-hmm.
And the U.S. Geological Survey used a lot of water level data, some of which I collected and they used when I was working for some of the cities in Thurston County. And so this is a groundwater contour map. That's what we call it.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So
again, I'm sorry to interrupt.
go ahead.
These are levels. I'm not going to use the term. These are levels reflecting the water level without factoring in pumping from wells that may have occurred and lower the level at various times.
That is correct. And very astute of you to point that out. Yes. Okay. This is sort of the natural background conditions with minimal pumping going on. Okay.
Right. Okay. Very good.
Right.
Thank you. Sorry.
So the other thing that this shows is that there is, on the west side of the airport, there's kind of a general flow direction to the north and to the west towards the Black River. Now see that kind of grayish green thick dashed line?
Groundwater divide?
Yeah, that's a groundwater divide, okay? And it's labeled there. And it sort of it does separate the groundwater flow that moves toward the west, towards the Black River and the Black River system, from the groundwater flow that moves towards the east, northeast, and toward the Deschutes River. Okay, so water that recharges at the airport area in general can move in two general directions: east northeast towards the Deschutes, and west northwest toward the Black River. Okay. And even somewhat of a north component towards Olympia. Why is this important? It's important because if you happen to spill a contaminant, or if there's a catastrophic accident at the airport, it could go either way, depending on conditions that are out there. Now, Mr. Examiner, I'll just say that these contours are dynamic, and as you pointed out, if you impose a lot of pumping from municipal supply wells, which we will show you, where those are located, you can change the way, these contours are configured and the pattern of them and change the flow directions too. So this is a dynamic situation that occurs through time. And when I say that, it's also seasonal. If rainfall during the rainy season, this pattern will be different than it will be in the summer. Okay. Not significantly necessarily, but it will be different. Okay. And the difference is significant if you're talking about the movement of a contaminant. Is it going to go towards a municipal supply well or not? Is it going to go towards a domestic well or what small water system well or not? So understanding these flow patterns are really critical to understanding the potential risks.
Okay.
Okay.
So talking about back to the drinking water sources specifically, will you describe the public supply wells that capture water from beneath the airport property? You mentioned them before, you referred to them as the bush wells. Can you give us a little more information about those?
Yeah, there's a set of about 6 major City of Tumwater supply wells just to the west of the airport, and there is a figure that I think would be
Okay.
beneficial to look at, and that is in our Exhibit 34, and I want to show the one that has the capture zones for those wells in it. I believe it might be yes, right here, figure 3.
Oh, figure 3.
Figure 3, one before that. Okay, can you zoom in a little bit, Ms. Newman, on that figure, please? Okay, all right. And then just scroll down a little bit so we can see the Palermo wells up on the top of this figure.
Okay.
Yeah, right there, right there. Perfect. Thank you. Okay. So again, this is a map view looking down, from above. The airport facility is shown there, the footprint of the airport. Let me just point out, Mr. Examiner, that Palermo, see that Palermo wells, which is sort of up at the top, just a little bit east of Interstate 5. Interstate 5 is that long linear thing that goes from north to south.
Right.
That's where the contamination occurred that I was referring to, that we showed back in early 1990s. And like I said, there's still ongoing work there, at the cost of millions of dollars, taxpayer money. Okay. Okay. So the wells that I want you to focus on now are the port wells. They're port wells 9, 10, 11, and 15. There's 4 of them there. And then these Bush Middle School wells, 12 and 14. These are the significant sources, along with the Palermo wells, for the City of Tumwater. Okay. Now, if you look at these geometric shapes that are sort of around each of the wells, the innermost areas are kind of this sort of, in my vision, it's sort of a greenish gray color for the area that's closest to the well. That's what we call a half-year capture zone. And the pink would be the 1-year capture zone, the next one out. And then the next one out would be this sort of orange, fleshy colored. It's about a 10, that would be a 5-year capture zone. And then the green area, which encompasses a lot of the wells, and including that southwest well and the Lathrop well, that would be a 10-year capture zone. Okay, so what this is showing is that in this aquifer, in this QVA aquifer, or QGA aquifer, which is the source for the water moving to these wells, these capture zones lie beneath, more than half of the footprint of the airport. Okay. And again, if something were to happen at the airport, like a catastrophic, God forbid, a catastrophic accident at the airport that had to be, responded to, extinguished with fire, maybe fire foam agents, or if there's just a leak that occurs over a long period of time at the airport, These contaminants could very easily move downward and get into that aquifer and then be pumped to, or flow towards, that contaminant could move towards and be pumped out of these wells. So this is a very vulnerable situation, okay, that we have here. I want to show you that next figure. I think it's figure 4, just to give you another. This is essentially a very similar image to that figure 3, and what we have done here in this sort of greenish color is shown that 10-year capture zone and how it underlies the airport footprint. So again, let's say, about maybe half to a little over half of the airport lies directly above that 10-year capture zone for these municipal supply wells for the city of Tumwater. Okay, the other issue here, and we do have another figure, looking at what's going on to the, there we go, yes, figure 5. So what we've plotted here, Mr. Examiner, is this comes from the Department of Ecology's well log database. It sounds like you're familiar with well logs and maybe that well log database. We have plotted at each one of those circles. You see those green circles that have a number next to them?
Yes.
We plotted the number of wells that occur within or at the center of each quarter section. Okay. That's a 1/16 of a section of a 1 square mile section. Okay. I think there's one circle there that's blue that has a number 2 next to it. That is, oops.
Oh,
I'm not
sorry.
seeing. There we go.
That was my bad.
Okay. There's one
I forgot
blue circle
everyone
with
was looking at my screen.
There's a blue circle there with a number 2 after it. That's like 2 wells that are in the center, I think, of a 1 square mile section. Anyway, the important point here is this is a depiction of which wells, domestic and small water system wells in this area, which I'm not sure if this is considered. I think this might be considered unincorporated Thurston County, but maybe it's within the city of Tumwater. I don't know for sure, but this area is basically the area that lies down gradient, downstream from the airport footprint. And if there was a contamination issue, like we've been talking about, somewhere maybe on the eastern half of the airport, it could impact any one of these wells. Okay, and there's over 100 wells here. So what I've shown you on the west side is that there's these large municipal supply wells for the city of Tumwater that could be affected, and here on this side, there's a lot of more rural / domestic water wells that could be impacted by any contamination at the airport. Okay, that's the significance of this one.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we talked a little bit about the Deschutes River. Can you describe, you described it as another source that would be impacted by the proposal, and we saw that the groundwater flow is clearly moving towards that from the airport. But can you describe the river for us in terms of kind of the hydrologic, what's important about the river with respect to water?
Yeah. So the lower reaches of the Deschutes River, and I'm using that term to kind of set us geographically where we are near the airport. From the airport area all the way down to the mouth of the Deschutes, Capitol Lake, and Olympia.
Maybe I'll do this again so you can.
Yeah, that would be good. Let's see. Actually, could we show that groundwater contour map that we were looking at earlier? The one, going back up. Okay. So perfect. So the reach of the Deschutes River from the kind of closest little meander, which gets, which is within, I don't know what is our scale. Can we show the scale on the bottom there?
There's
Yeah.
0.25.
So that's about, I'd say, less than a half a mile. Yeah, I'd say a quarter to a half mile from the
This-
airport footprint. Yes, right there. Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you. So this reach from that point all the way down to about the top of the page,
Down.
it's receiving the river is actually what we call a gaining river. Okay, and what that means is that groundwater is moving, northeast from the airport area to the river, and it's discharging to the river. And it provides an important component of flow in the river. And especially, Mr. Examiner, during the summer and fall, when we don't get any rainfall in this region, right? It's what we're experiencing right now. It's a lovely time to live here, right? But what is really critical is that groundwater that discharges up through the riverbed, the Deschutes riverbed, in this time of the year, provides cool or cold water to the river. Why is that important? It's important because we have salmon species that use this river. Chinook, coho. I think there's even some steelhead, and they need cool, clean water. Okay, so the concern about the airport development is how might it affect the flow, the timing, the magnitude of the flow, and the duration of the flow to the river and discharging into the river, which could impact, the availability of nice, cool, clean water and flow into the river. That's something that needs to be investigated. There is already a TMDL on the Deschutes River that says it's lacking or that there's a temperature issue there. And so we can't have a project that is going to impact that temperature quality in the Deschutes River. So
What
that's
is
the
it?
significance.
What is a TMDL?
Total maximum daily load. Okay, and it's basically it's actually a process whereby certain water bodies in the state are designated to have degraded quality for some reason. It can be, nutrients, it can be temperature, and then there is an action plan that is put together to try and remedy that problem. So there's already a temperature issue in this river. We don't want to create another, we don't want to compound that or make that, worse than it already is.
And is that related to the Clean Water Act?
Yes, I believe that comes from the Federal Clean Water Act.
Okay.
But it's something that's administered by, the state of Washington, Department of Ecology. Yeah.
Okay. Let's move on to the development of the airport. You've actually covered, I think, just because it's inherently part of the discussion about these resources. But I do want to make sure we cover our bases to talk about the adverse impacts that will be caused by development of the airport. And I'd like to talk about impacts. You've already covered this a little bit, but in terms of water quality and water quantity. And I'll start with water quality. And you mentioned in your report that the wellhead protection area capture zones for the wells we discussed. Let's see, we may have already covered this. Do you think you've covered that already? I
In
think
terms
we've
of water
talked about
quality,
that. Yeah, let me skip past that because I guess when you were talking about this, how can you elaborate a little more on why development or how development can cause adverse impacts and contaminate these wellhead areas, protection areas, capture zones?
okay, so one of the there's we basically, we humans use chemicals um to basically, we store and use chemicals to do the activities that we do, right? And this airport is no different than that. So there's certain things that happen out there, like fueling planes, which requires storing and storing fuel. And there's cleaning, like solvents that require storage too. And there's oil and grease that's generated. There's some very challenging chemicals too that have been introduced to our modern society, like this chemical called PFAS, which has been used at least historically and hopefully is being phased out. Although the substitutes for it may not necessarily be any worse, but they are used in firefighting foams and suppression. And one of the things that when I look at this project, I say, okay, has firefighting foam been used out here for either an accident or for training purposes? There's a whole slew of airports all around the country, and even in our state. Whidbey Island's was one example where PFAS, these perfluorinated alkyl substances that are in these firefighting foams, are now in the environment, especially in groundwater. And you know those are the things that cause a lot of problems.
How would
And then
past
there's also emerging chemicals too that are causing problems too. With basically, you've probably heard of 6-ppdq, which are these tire wear particles or tire wear products that also get into the water stream that can cause a lot of problems for fish in particular. Go ahead, Ms. Newman. I'm sorry.
Well, I was just
I
curious,
interrupted
you're
you.
talking about maybe contaminants on the site from existing or past introduction of toxic or hazardous materials. And we're talking about developing the site in the future. What's the relevance of contaminants on the site that are existing already? And what impacts could be caused by future development related to those existing contaminants?
Well, if there are existing contaminants on the site, future development will change the way water moves on the site and off the site and into the ground, into the subsurface, into soils and the aquifers. So what this, and I know we haven't talked about the preferred alternative yet, but what this preferred alternative should motivate is the port to basically look at all these properties that they are proposing they're going to develop and do an inventory of what's out there, what's been going on out there historically, both from like a paper study, but also get out on the ground and do work. And the other thing that, because we want to identify is, has anybody been doing any wildcat dumping out there, and how is the port going to deal with this kind of thing before they would develop? There's another issue too that I want to bring up, and that is, historically there's been a lot of wells put in the ground, and maybe even some of these underground injection control wells that are existing and functioning on this property that need to be inventoried and discovered and dealt with. My personal opinion is that this is an area where there should not be underground injection control wells or systems that are not highly scrutinized or monitored. And I'm talking about maybe even an outright ban of those types of facilities at this site, just because of the vulnerability. Again, I'm talking about, this underground reservoir that's supplying tens of thousands of people. And again, I
And
have
have you
experience from, the really nice.
have
Yeah.
you come
ahead.
across many aquifers like this one in this?
I would say this is one of the most vulnerable settings that I have seen in, Western Washington in my work. I've worked mainly in Washington State.
And you said you've been working for over 30 years in
Over
this
30
area?
years, yeah. Yep.
Okay. And then what about water quantity impacts? What are the adverse impacts to water quantity that will be caused by development of the airport property?
So I mentioned changes in the groundwater flow patterns that could occur due to changing the landscape of that area, of the airport area on the Deschutes River. There's another water course, I would call it a sub-basin, which is to the south of the airport. And it's the Hopkins Ditch / Salmon Creek drainage. And I know that in that basin, that sub-basin, there is Oregon spotted frog, which is an ESA listed species. And it has very particular life cycle stages that require certain amounts of water to be in certain locations and places. In particular, this frog needs 1 inch to 6 inches of water in open fields, not vegetated with grasses, from February to April to do its egg laying phase. It's called oviposition, but it's an egg laying phase it's basically, the key to survival of this, one of the keys to survival of this frog, which has been decimated, over the years in the Pacific Northwest. So it's really important that the port takes on the role of figuring out how this development at the airport is going to affect the hydrology and the hydraulics on the port property and off the port property, and anything that would change the flow patterns to the south of the airport. And there is a figure, Ms. Newman, we could look at. I think it might be down around figure 7 in exhibit 34, just to give you a little bit of a picture of what I'm talking about. Right here, yes. So again, here's a map view showing the airport property, and there is this drainage or sub-basin called Hopkins Ditch, Salmon Creek, and you can see that it's within maybe a third of a mile of the south edge of the airport. Its headwaters there, and it drains from right to left to the west towards the Black River. And there is ESA listed Oregon spotted frog species that occur all along this drainage. So this is another place where the port needs to do some analysis to figure out how the development of this port property, is going to affect the flow in this drainage in this sub-basin, and potentially affect the habitat of the Oregon spotted frog.
Okay, I have a question. This is going back to this diagram, figure 1 on page 4 of your report, and the groundwater flow patterns in figure 2. Can you explain, when we see these elevations, 192, 186, 180, how does that correlate with this elevation? I'm assuming, and tell me if I'm wrong, that the 192 is feet above zero on the
You're
other
correct,
one.
Ms. Newman. Yes, yep. So
Okay.
those contours are referenced to feet above sea level. And
Okay,
then on
so,
this diagram that you see the 0 on that cross section,
yeah,
that 0
that's-
is sea level effectively. So
okay.
yes,
So what, this doesn't mean 192 feet below ground. That's 192 feet above sea level, this number right
Correct.
here. Okay.
yes.
So that's
that is-
essentially roughly 20 feet or 80 feet from above ground.
It's about, yeah, roughly, I mean, 192 would be 8 feet below
8
ground.
feet below ground, sorry,
Yeah.
yeah, obviously. Okay.
Now, okay, so, but I'm gonna add a little complexity here, okay? Just to make sure you guys, that groundwater contour map that you see in the next figure, those are the contours that represent the water level elevation if you were to complete a well, a monitoring well, for example, not a well with a pump in it, in that QGA aquifer, okay? That doesn't necessarily represent the water table, okay? It's probably a pretty good approximation of where the water table is. So I think what you were doing, Ms. Newman, was saying, okay, 192 feet means that the water level or the water table is 8 feet below ground surface, because see how the ground surface is roughly 200 feet in this diagram?
Right.
It's probably pretty close because, and I'm going to say this again, because that QGT, that till layer is leaky, okay? But it may not be exact. In other words, the
Okay.
water level, the water table in that QGOS aquifer or QGOS unit is maybe close to 8 feet below ground, but plus or minus.
Okay.
So anyway,
Right.
just
Let me interrupt so I understand. I think what I'm understanding, I hope correctly, is you're saying the water table may be a number above the number on the contour lines, but it's not going to be below the number on the contour lines on the next figure.
that is correct. Yes, because in general,
because of the upper layer, because there may be water in the QGOS.
That's right. And it's
Okay.
probably in general what we call, Mr. Examiner, there's a vertical downward gradient from the QGOS into the QGA. Okay. So the water level would have to be a little higher in the QGOS than the QGA to have a vertical downward gradient. Yes. So yeah, water that lands on the surface, say around 200 feet, will infiltrate, go into the QGOS, and then further flow both somewhat laterally in the QGOS, but also downward through that glacial till into the QGA. That's how the QGA is replenished. Okay, through vertical flow from rainfall that lands on the surface.
Well, as long as we're on this, as long as we're on this, and maybe I don't want to complicate things, but the 200-foot elevation on figure 1. The top horizontal line, is that meant to reflect the actual elevation of the well openings for each of the wells shown on that?
Yes.
Because then there's no downgrade, there's no upgrading or downgrading from any of the wells. They're all at the same elevation. The top of the well.
You're talking about the top of the well. The top of the well are essentially at ground surface, or maybe a couple feet above or below. We don't know exactly, but roughly. And the bottom elevation of the well is shown as where that little horizontal line is at the bottom of them. That's where they actually drilled to the bottom, and they drilled into this other unit called the TQU. But the well screens for these wells are actually in that QGA unit. That's where the water bearing zone is. The TQU may have a little bit of water here and there, but not much. Not compared to the QGA. I don't know. Right. Did I clarify that for you, Examiner? I'm not sure I did.
Well, no. Well, I understand it, I think.
Okay.
And before we go on, and I'm interrupting again, I'm assuming, and maybe incorrectly, that TQU and these other terms are from the United States Geological Survey, soils classifications.
Yes, you're
Okay.
absolutely correct. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So now I want to talk, I'm going to talk a little bit to set up a question I have for you, but you earlier testified that you reviewed the SEPA environmental checklist for the master plan update and the MDNS, and I have some questions about those. When you look at the SEPA environmental checklist on pages 13 through 15, and again on pages 28 through 30, and I can call that up if you'd like, but I'm just going to summarize here. The port provides answers on the checklist related to surface water, groundwater, and stormwater impacts. And does this ring a bell? I mean, I'm going to tell you what the answers are, but if you remember it differently, tell me. In general, the port says that the adoption of the airport master plan update will not by itself cause any adverse impacts, and the potential for environmental impacts will be evaluated in the future on a case-by-case basis when future site-specific projects are proposed. And in this hearing, the port is arguing that it cannot conduct environmental review at this stage because the details of the airport master plan update are too speculative. They claim the impacts cannot be analyzed now because the proposed development is too uncertain or undefined. Do you have an opinion from a hydrogeological standpoint and the impacts, water impacts, about that approach?
Yes, I do. I think, okay, maybe a plan on paper doesn't have any impacts, but the intent of what the port wants to do here should set off an entire string of what I would say characterization to understand those properties and some analysis, hydrologic analysis that's integrated into this plan right now that's actually going to drive what the preferred alternative looks like. I mean, to me, it's absurd that kind of analysis is not being done now. And frankly, it's a little frightening to hear it being pushed forward, kicking the can down the road because of the vulnerability that I've talked about with this system.
Why does it
That's my
matter
general
now?
statement.
Like you're aware that they've chosen and committed to, are you familiar with chapter 4 of the master plan update? The preferred
Yes.
alternative?
I think the preferred alternatives and the different components or elements of what they saying would change or what would be developed. Are we talking about the same thing, Ms. Newman?
The preferred alternative that the port has adopted, the development plan and maybe I'll call it up for you. Would that help if I?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so chapter 4 of the master plan update is the identification and evaluation of alternatives. Have you reviewed this section of the plan?
Yes. The page
And
is further down that actually, yeah.
Okay, there's just for the description here generally, this includes consideration of taxiway alternatives, runway alternatives, and then they developed several different alternatives that are described here, and there's a development area alternatives, where they choose commercial development, aviation-related industrial development, feasibility of commercial air service development, and they analyze different areas for these uses, and different acreage for these uses. And then in the end, they land on a final preferred alternative,
That 4.9, figure 4.9, I think in there.
which is
that
figure
correct?
4.9.
Yeah, okay.
And it's described, I can just go down all the way to the end here. And my question about this, there's figure 4.9. This is the preferred alternative that will be adopted. They've chosen the acreage and the location for these development areas and the taxiway alternatives and the runway alternatives. In your opinion, I guess my first question is, do we have enough information based on choosing between these alternatives to conduct a meaningful analysis of the impacts now?
Yes, there is. And the issues that I brought up with water quality and water quantity and the changes that occur in the hydrologic system or hydraulic system at this site those things are known, and that those variables should be rolled into the preferred alternatives. In other words, how are they going to use these different pieces of land, and how are they going to develop them? And let me just give you an example. Mr. Examiner, I showed you that 10-year capture zone for, the City of Tumwater supply wells. It kind of cuts the airport in half. And by the way, we've got a new orientation of this airport map, right? We're looking at north is to the left, I believe.
I don't know if I can. Is
Yeah.
that north? No, I don't
Now
know
it's
if that
north,
helps.
Yeah, that helps a little bit, but there we go. So, you recall that the City of Tumwater wells are to the west, and their capture zones occur, within, beneath and most of the western half of this airport footprint, right? So, wait a minute, we got that going. Sorry, we got to
Do
go
I have it
180
wrong?
degrees.
I think that's,
Sorry about that.
That was my,
There we go. There we
Mistake.
go. Yes.
Yep.
Now we're oriented north. Thank you. Up is north on the page. One thing that should be rolled into the analysis and is information that is available now is to say, okay, look at that. Look at the area that in orange on the west side versus the east side, and look at the areas in gray on the west side versus the east side, and say, okay, what are we going to be doing in those different areas? And what if we were going to store and use chemicals in those different areas? Does it make sense to have that type of activity or that type of development on that west side when we know that the capture zones for the City of Tumwater wells, are beneath the airport on that west side and potentially could be impacted, taking out, a well or two that could impact, tens of thousands of people in the City of Tumwater? Or is it better to put it on the east side? Now, if we put it on the east side, we potentially could impact also water wells if there was a release of a contaminant. But, these are the kind of trade-offs that should be happening now with this preferred alternative. I don't see anything in this preferred alternative that discusses the hydrologic and environmental conditions at the site and downstream from the site. And that needs to happen now before the ball gets rolling. Okay.
and what about an analysis of, do you think that there should be an analysis of full build out at this
Yes,
stage?
there should be analysis of full build out at this stage, because we want to know how full build out is going to change the hydrologic patterns that are currently existing out there, which may impact, conditions in the Deschutes River downstream, conditions in that Hopkins Ditch and Salmon Creek that are down to the south of this area, and the potential to mobilize maybe contaminants that are already out there. That's where we get back into this like site characterization and site assessment that should be done on each of these properties. And looking at, how those properties could impact existing conditions out there, and that also is in alignment with looking at how those, and I know the port is examining this, how this development is going to affect those other species habitats, the birds and the gopher. But the full build out analysis should be done now. Absolutely.
And in your professional opinion, will adoption of the preferred alternative in the airport master plan cause probable significant adverse impacts related to water?
Yes, it will. Yeah. And it's a question of what that degree is. It definitely, there will be contaminants that will be released. And it will change and alter the hydrologic patterns. And that sort of analysis needs to be done. And we have tools to do that. In fact, the county has a groundwater model that would be the basis for starting to do that work.
Yeah, okay. So just to kind of finalize your testimony here, you did in your report identify environmental evaluations that are required at this stage of planning. Can you explain in layperson terms what you can see should be done now? What kind of the assessment and analysis that would be done?
Yeah, I mentioned this earlier, and the first thing to do is, what we call a desktop study or paper study of all the environmental components that may or may not exist in the, within the airport footprint. And then I would get out there and literally walk these properties that they want to develop and see what's out there. Has anybody been dumping anything out there? I'm sure the port has had some control over these properties, but they're not surveilling it 24/7 to see what's been going on out there. I would even potentially do some geophysics of soils to see if there are wells or features that penetrate ground surface into the that QGOS unit that we've talked about. And, there's ground penetrating radar, electrical resistivity. There's all kinds of methods you can use to see what is in the shallow subsurface that could be conduits for moving contaminants from the surface down into the groundwater system. So there's a lot that should be done. And it has to be done by really one authority, because there's certain standards that need to be met and are set and met by one authority to get it done right. If you just leave it to maybe tenants that's going to lease or develop a property down the road, they don't necessarily meet those same standards that we need to have to, basically ensure that we're not going to contaminate this incredible reservoir of groundwater that we're using in this area. So that I call that all characterization. Okay, then there has to be analysis at looking at full build out, and I call that a modeling analysis to figure out how this full build out is going to affect the hydrology. Again, change those flow patterns, which could affect conditions in the Deschutes River, conditions in Hopkins Ditch and Salmon Creek. And then from there, I would move on to say, okay, let's do some risk analysis and scenario planning to lock down what is appropriate and what is not appropriate to developing these certain properties. And all that can happen now.
Okay. Very quickly.
And wait, let me just say one more thing, Ms. Newman.
Mm-hmm.
All that can happen now and should be folded into the preferred alternative. Okay.
You mean provide information when you say folded into?
It should inform and drive. It should inform and drive the preferred alternatives out there, or preferred
Okay.
alternative. It should drive it. Okay. What I'm
You
saying
mean the
is,
choice of alternatives? What
yes,
they choose?
yeah, there should be hydrologic and environmental analysis should go into driving what they choose. I don't see that
Okay.
anywhere. I don't see that anywhere in this master plan.
Okay, there are a few exhibits that I just want to quickly touch on as a final note here. The exhibit number 35 is a letter from you to the Port of Olympia dated June 14th, 2020. Does this, I'm putting it up on the screen. Does this look familiar to you? Are you familiar with this document?
We're objecting
Yes, it
to the
does.
exhibit, but I suppose that can wait.
Right, I understand.
I do recognize this, yes.
Well, if you would like to provide your objection, I'd like to have the witness respond to the objection. That's the purpose that I want to pull this up for.
That's fair. I believe that we were objecting to this one for the same reason that we objected to portions of Mr. Mathieu's report, references to habitat issues.
I think there's no habitat discussion in here. This is about,
I think I see. Yeah, this one discusses the new market industrial campus as opposed to the airport, and that's not an airport property.
right.
And NMIC, New Market Industrial Complex, is what is at issue here, and that's not relevant. And also, this is from 2020, so this is not relevant to the current matter.
Okay, and Mr. Mathieu, can you explain the relevance of this letter to the current matter?
Yes, it's very relevant because it deals with the concept of cumulative impacts. All right. This letter was written, I believe, addressed to the Port of Olympia when they were considering the proposal for the new market industrial campus. And I believe at that time there was also this notion that the analysis of any environmental or hydrologic impacts in the development process of the new market campus would be done by, I believe, by tenants as they occupied, leased, and developed those properties. And not looking at the entire development as a whole and looking at the environmental and hydrologic impacts together. And that's dangerous because, if you develop one little parcel and someone does an analysis of the hydrologic impacts, it may not be significant. But if you add up all those parcels in this new market campus, for example, you will potentially create, what I would say is habitat or hydrologic failure somewhere downstream. Okay. And I would say that this new market campus, together with the airport proposed development, is the same situation. I mean, these things need to be looked at together and integrated into an analysis because together they will have a much bigger impact on the downstream effects, on the hydrology and habitats that that are relying on the hydrology. Okay, so it is relevant because this new market area and this airport area are being developed to look at this thing together and holistically for that reason. Did I answer your question, Ms. Newman?
Yeah, and then you've mentioned ground disturbance as far as development. And I'm curious to know if the development introduction of impervious surface with development is an issue that would cause impacts related to hydrogeology. Just impervious surface being introduced onto the site, is that relevant?
Yeah, it basically generates a lot more stormwater runoff than would occur on a a vegetated surface, right? On a natural vegetated surface. Plants will do something that we call evapotranspire. So when rainfall falls on plants in the soil, they will soak up some of that rainfall and put it back up in the atmosphere. Okay, so that when you pave over that vegetated soil, you are losing that function and you generate a lot more stormwater. And then it's a question of how you're going to deal with that stormwater. And let me
Okay.
tell you, a lot of stormwater systems in Western Washington are not functioning very well at trying to replicate the natural system, the pre-existing conditions that were there before the pavement was laid down.
Mr. Examiner, I'd like to offer Exhibit 35, which was objected to by the board.
Well, I will do this. I honestly think if I didn't admit it, he's testified to the various, his way of analyzing issues that are set out in Exhibit 35. But I will admit it for very limited purposes. Primarily just to buttress the way he thinks hydrologic and related issues should be dealt with in general. I'm not admitting it for any of the arguments regarding the Kimmy Road or the distribution center of the Newmarket Industrial Campus. So I think it's, I would say, tangentially related to his testimony. So I'm admitting it for that purpose.
Can I, Mr. Examiner, just mention that one of our arguments is cumulative impacts of this development needs to be considered in conjunction.
Well, I understand that, Ms. Newman, and this explains the way your witness considers how cumulative impact should be considered, but I'm not admitting this to consider a proposed distribution center and a Newmarket Industrial Campus in 2020 as being something I should consider as a related cumulative impact either before or after the preferred alternative here. I don't know if that makes sense, but so in that sense, it's tangentially related, but it does buttress the way he looks at cumulative impact issues. So I'm admitting it for that purpose. I don't know if that makes sense, but otherwise, I mean, I don't want a lot of testimony about the I-5 distribute. Well, unless you want to produce it, the I-5 distribution center planned in 2020, the Newmarket Industrial Campus planned in 2020, the current status of those developments, where they are, how they're related to the aquifer. Do we really need to go into all of that?
Okay, I understand.
Can I make one point?
I'm not trying to be difficult, but I mean, if I admit it and you're going to make arguments from that, I think the court has a right then to bring in evidence about those developments.
Can I just make one statement, Mr. Examiner, that the Newmarket development and the airport development and that other Kimmy Road distribution center, they are all within that Hopkins Ditch Salmon Creek basin. So they would have a hydrologic impact cumulatively on that basin. That's all I wanted to say.
But as I understand your testimony, a good portion of any development in the city of Tumwater falls in that category, correct?
That is true. Yes. Yep.
And Mr. Hearing Examiner, I would just counter that with the idea that as Ms. Newman, Mr. Mathieu are putting it forward, there's absolutely no limiting principle on kind of the scope of this. Should everything within the watershed ever be considered in this evaluation? I don't think that is what the law mandates. And I don't think it's appropriate for the hearing examiner to evaluate everything within that context with no limiting principle.
I think it's
Go
related
ahead.
to existing conditions and a need to understand the hydrogeology and impacts of what's happening now, and then exacerbating the problem and adding to the problem with development of the airport. It's a SEPA, it's a classic SEPA analysis of impacts. And it's in existing conditions and current. I mean, basically, I think the main point we're trying to make is this is complicated and they can and need to review it now. So that's our main issue.
Well, I understand that, and I think you can make those arguments without having me to consider in any specific way the proposed I-5 distribution center or the Port of Olympia's proposed new market industrial campus. I think you can make an argument that any other development in the aquifer recharge area or the defined sub area of this watershed should be considered in a cumulative impact analysis.
Okay.
So I'll admit it for the limited purpose I said I would, which it buttresses or supports the witnesses' testimony that that the impacts of developments on the hydrologic functions of the aquifer, the upper aquifer he's been talking about, should be considered, and its relationship to other issues such as water quality.
Okay. Okay, there are two other exhibits that the port objected to that I'd like to discuss. Exhibit 39, I would welcome the port. Maybe it makes sense to provide your objection, and then if I could have my witness respond to it to explain. I think you had earlier said that it was from the 1990s and early 2000s was the basis for objecting to this.
Now, what is the basis for objecting to exhibit 39?
Yeah, it is related to early 90s and the 2000s, and also relevant is that Mr. Mathieu is not the author of this, as far as I know. He has no knowledge of it. It's essentially it's hearsay, Mr. Hearing Examiner, and furthermore, not relevant because of both time and it is the same general area, but I would say space as well. It's not relevant.
So if I could ask.
Just wait a moment. I appreciate the objection. Unless exhibit 39 is not a accurate print of that section of the Water Resource Inventory Area Report for WIRA 13. I'm gonna resort to the civil rules on evidence. It is a public record, and these are published. So even though he's not the author, I could probably even look at these even if it wasn't an exhibit, but there might be an objection to that. So I'm going to admit this.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Examiner. I do, just for the weight of the document itself, I would like to ask a few questions about this, Mr. Mathieu. First of all, who do you know who prepared this document, or what agency prepared it, or local jurisdiction?
I'm a little vague on who did this. I did scan through this, Ms. Newman.
Okay.
This could have been an ecology publication or ecology funded publication for.
I think just that might speak for itself, the document, because it's got contact staff person for more information, and it's a county watershed planning committee. So we don't need to, but
right.
Is this, can you just describe this document and how it's important to your understanding of this area?
Yeah, I mean, this document was produced by, our incredible watershed planning funding that started, I think, in the mid to late 90s, and it kind of laid. This was part of what we were doing all around the state, trying to characterize watershed conditions so that we could actually take action to improve those conditions for both people and fish and wildlife. And a lot of these watershed documents have really critical foundational information in them. And so they are very relevant when we're talking about water resources. And this document in particular, I believe, had some references to protecting fisheries and and water quality at the mouth of the Deschutes River. And so basically it just bolsters the fact that the port, in their development of the master plan for the airport, needs to, examine the potential impacts of Deschutes River water quality in that lower reach of the Deschutes. So I think it's very relevant because it adds to the body of knowledge that we use as hydrogeologists to make decisions.
Outdated?
This kind of information is never outdated, no, because it may need to be, looked at again. Some conditions do change over time, but we as hydrogeologists like to look at how things change. What are the trends in the hydrologic conditions or the water quality conditions? So it's really important to use information like this that goes back in time. Okay.
Okay.
Trends are really important. Trends are critical in the analysis of, what we should be doing as people to, preserve, protect, restore, conserve our environmental conditions.
Okay. And there are other documents, Mr. Examiner, that are in the record that are related to Mr. Mathieu's testimony, but we will just refer to those in our closing brief rather than have him walk through them because they kind of speak for themselves and the port did not object to them.
Okay. Okay.
And I believe, Mr. Mathieu, unless there's something, is there anything else you wanted to say? We're going to wrap it up here.
I would just end it by emphasizing that, again, this is a very vulnerable setting, with the current activities that are already occurring above this, amazing groundwater reservoir that we have, just 20 to, maybe a couple hundred feet below ground surface. And it really needs protection. I've done most of my work in Thurston County over the last 30 years, but I do live in Seattle. And I'll just say this, the level of care that the Seattle Public Utility has for the upper Cedar River watershed, which is one of our water sources, is incredible. They surveil that upper watershed area. They don't allow anybody into it. And we don't have the same type of level of care for what's beneath the ground and the aquifers that we use and we do not see. There's really a mismatch there. And we need to be really careful with these groundwater resources that we rely on. And it's not just an environmental issue. This is an economic issue, Mr. Examiner. I mean, a contamination issue of an aquifer and wells, sets us back economically because then we have to, invest all this money in cleaning up a problem that should have never occurred in the first place. There you go. I've said enough.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Anaker.
Mr. Examiner, before I get going, would you mind if we took about a 15-minute break? Or is that going to mess with your schedule?
My schedule's messed with anyway, so
Sorry.
so I would say 10 minutes. We can start at 10:15.
Sounds good. Thank you very
Okay.
much.
Thank you.
I'm back. Sorry if you were waiting for me.
Very good. Mr. Aneker.
Yes. Good morning, Mr. Matthew. Hopefully this won't be too long or painful. To get started, Mr. Matthew, are you an attorney?
I'm not an attorney. I'm a hydrogeologist.
And I'm sorry, before we go any further, we did swear in Mr. Matthew, correct?
I swore him in at the beginning.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I thank you, Mr.
No,
Hearing Examiner.
sometimes I forget, so I'm glad you mentioned it.
Just thought I would check. So you're not an attorney. Are you an ecologist?
Ecologist. I'm a hydrogeologist.
Okay.
Or
And so you're
geologist.
not a wildlife biologist either.
I'm not a wildlife biologist. Correct.
Have you ever been a member of Black Hills Audubon Society under either that name or its new name?
Never.
So have you ever participated in the preparation of an EIS under SEPA?
I have participated in the components of that. I've not authored an EIS solely myself, but I've done portions of it and, you know, collaborated with people who were writing it.
Okay.
A participant, let's say.
Okay. Yeah. In the same sense, have you ever participated or worked on, collaborated on an EIS related to an airport master plan update?
I don't think I have. That's not a document that I've actually participated on preparing.
Okay. So I'm going to share my screen here. And so you recognize this document, correct? I believe we've already marked it as Exhibit 34.
Yes, that's the report we prepared
Okay.
for this hearing, right?
Yeah. When you say we, who all worked on it?
I worked on it with a team of folks. One of which is my technical editor who supported me, and another person was a GIS specialist who was able to develop some of those figures. And yeah, but I'm the sole author of it.
Okay. So
I have my shop is very small now. It's basically just me. So I team with others to do some of the services to bring my product to, you know, fruition, so to speak.
okay, so I'm just looking at the first paragraph of the report. You're talking about the report here. You say it summarizes our concerns regarding the hydrologic impacts of this proposed airport expansion, impacts that, if not properly mitigated, have the potential to harm not only the drinking water sources for thousands of residents, but also the critical habitat for a number of threatened and or endangered species, correct?
That is correct.
And you say, if not mitigated, is mitigation what is essential here?
If not properly mitigated is what I said, I think, something like that. Is that right?
Okay. And
yeah, and that term is a term that I'm going to say is a general term, and I know there's a legal definition of mitigation, but I'm going to say that I'm using that more in the general lay sense. Okay, I'm not necessarily confining that to a legal definition.
okay, and how would you define
mitigation? Well, I define it as lessening the severity of. That's how I would define it.
Okay,
in this situation.
That is fair. So I'm going to go down to that third paragraph here, and let me just. Okay, so SEPA requires agencies to evaluate impacts, assuming full build out under a new master plan. And you're not an attorney, correct? We already went over that.
That's correct.
Did anyone help you write this sentence?
This is me. I mean, I've talked to my attorneys and the attorneys on this case, and I've talked to attorneys over the years. I mean, I've worked with attorneys.
Okay.
So
What
some of
does,
this is knowledge, experiential knowledge that I
Okay.
brought to this report.
what does full build out mean to you?
Full build out means examining the full development of all the individual parcels so that collectively they are seen as one whole unit together.
Okay. So we're going to stop sharing very briefly. Bring up some other, need to make sure I've got the right one here. Okay, and I will once again share my screen. And here we have another document that you looked at. It's been marked as Exhibit 1, and it is Chapter 4 of the Master Plan Update Draft, correct?
That's what it looks like, yes. Uh-huh.
And just generally, you reviewed this document, correct?
Yes. I wouldn't say I know the details of it like I do my own report, but I did review it and scrutinized certain key sections of it.
What sections did you scrutinize?
I think I scrutinized sort of the interior body, maybe from I just see 4-38 there, maybe to 4-44, and then figure 4-9, which we looked at before.
Okay, so
I
the preferred
I scrutinized
alternative.
that a little bit. Yeah, the preferred alternative. Correct. Yep.
And so figure 4-9 is the visual representation of the preferred alternative, correct?
Correct. Yes. Yes.
Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna bring up another image, here. This is still Exhibit 1, but it's Chapter 5, Airport Layout Plan.
Mm-hmm.
Did you review this document at all?
I scanned through that, fairly cursorily. I didn't look at the detailed site plans.
Okay. Did you look at, it's page 4, I believe, sheet 3 is how it appears. Did you look at this document?
It looks familiar, but if you're going to quiz me on the details of this, I probably won't be able to produce
Okay.
the information you want.
Are you
But
familiar with the term airport layout plan?
Yeah, ALP. Yep. That acronym is used throughout the preferred alternative document too.
Okay. And so I'm going to represent to you that this is the airport layout plan. Can you quickly compare it to the preferred alternative that you said you already reviewed?
Well, it looks very similar. I mean, they're in I'd say a general gross scale, those gray areas look similar to the preferred alternative plan, and those sort of what is that a color? Pink fleshy colors looks somewhat similar. And, I see a lot of line work related to taxiways and runways that are probably related to what I looked at in the preferred alternative plan. I mean, generally, but if you want me to say the details are different, I mean, there might be some different details, but I think it's largely the same. Okay.
Okay. And are you I know you're not an attorney, but do you know generally if any federal approval is required for, just in your general knowledge, for an airport layout plan?
Objection. This is a legal question. It's outside of the scope of direct. This is a legal issue, and this witness is not prepared to talk about that legal issue.
Well,
That's okay. I can move on.
I'm not, are you withdrawing the question? I don't think he's asking for, at least I'm not looking for a legal opinion from this.
He
gentleman.
asked if a federal approval is necessary, and it was,
If he's familiar with that, whether that's the case, I think that's a legitimate question.
I just maintain that it's a legal question, but. You can answer the question, Mr. Mathieu.
It does sound like a legal question, but I will say that the FAA has jurisdiction over, I think most all our airports throughout the country. So I would imagine that they would have to review and approve plans. You know, there's a lot of infrastructure that goes into airports that's managed by and on behalf of, you know, our federal government and the, you know, air traffic control system, all that. So I don't know if I answered the question, but.
So one more item from that Exhibit 1. This is another chapter, or rather it's an appendix 4-1. It's the Part 39, 139 Commercial Passenger Service Feasibility Study. Did you review this document at all?
Appendix 4.1. Yeah, I did actually download that, and I think I scanned through it quickly. Again,
Okay.
I won't know the details. You can point me to things you want me to look at, and we can talk about it if you want.
Okay. Cursory review, you did not base your report on this document.
Did not base the report on this document. Right.
I'm
Correct.
sorry, you broke up a little bit on my end.
I did not base the report on this document, but I did take a look at it.
Okay.
So there's probably some influence this document had on my report.
Okay. Did you generally consider the implementation of commercial service at the Olympia Airport in your report? And your testimony as well?
Commercial versus what? What are you contrasting it with?
Commercial passenger as opposed to general aviation that is there now.
I'm not sure I understand the question. Could you repeat the question and try and give me a little more context? I feel like this is leading somewhere I don't really. It's
that's
outside
okay.
of my
I think I actually do not need to go. I think you've answered what I need you to answer there. So I am okay with just moving on from there. I'm going to go ahead and return to chapter 4, which is that preferred alternative. And figure 4.9, and I'm happy to go to other parts of the chapter if you would like, but I want to draw your attention to those kind of pink and gray areas that you talked about. I believe, and correct me if I'm misstating your testimony here, but I believe that you said one of the issues is that you don't really know what's going on in those areas, correct?
No, the issue is, I don't think that's an issue. The port doesn't know what's going on in those areas yet, but they do know that they will be developed. And
Okay.
that's what I'm saying. That's a lot of information to know that they will be developed.
Okay.
Yeah.
In evaluating hydrologic impacts on this sort of development, is it important to know the footprint of the buildings that will be going there?
Yes, among other things. Yes.
Okay. Is it important to know the amount of impermeable surface that will be on those areas?
It is important to know that, but we don't need to necessarily know it to do some planning level analysis.
Is it important to know what material that impervious surface will be?
It would be beneficial to know that, not necessarily critical. again, to do some planning level analysis at this point, at this stage of the game.
Okay. And
let me just say this: you can look at sort of end member cases. You know, if you're going to put down permeable concrete over, you know, a large area, you know, let's say hundreds of acres, that's one thing. You're going to put down, you know, asphalt pavement that's impervious, completely impervious, that's another thing. I mean, that's the kind of planning level analysis that should be incorporated into the port's work right now.
okay. But is anything, I guess, to kind of get to the next step, is there anything in the preferred alternative that details what kind of surface coverage there will be percentage wise?
No, there's not, but there should be.
Okay.
Now. Yeah.
Is there anything in the preferred alternative that speaks to the footprints of the buildings that will be in these areas?
No.
Is there anything related to what type of material, whether concrete or asphalt, those surfaces that are fully or partially impervious will be?
I didn't say anything about that.
Okay. Is it important to know the different contaminants that will be produced in these areas when evaluating the hydrological impacts?
Yes, and we do know that.
Okay.
Because there's proposed activities out here. Those chemicals support the activities that will happen out there, and so we do know that, and that's needs to be part of this analysis up front.
Okay. So I'm gonna bring up something here, and it's not an exhibit, but I'll represent to you that this is chapter 1834 of the Tumwater Municipal Code, and it is the airport related industrial zone district. And looks like section 1834-020 has a variety of permitted uses there. Could you read those permitted uses for me?
A through S?
Please.
Okay. Aviation and aviation related uses. B, wholesaling, manufacturing, assembling, repairing, fabricating, or other handling of products and equipment. C, warehouse distribution centers subject to requirements of TCM 1842, whatever, 110. D, general retail. E, offices. F, aviation fueling facilities. G, motor pool and equipment parking. H, park and ride facilities. I, transit facilities. J, the raising of crops, including trees. K, hotel, motel, and conference facilities. L, support facilities. M, parks, open spaces, and recreational facilities. N, post offices. O, child daycare center, child mini daycare center. P, schools on parcels abutting residential zones and outside of the airport hazard area, subject to provisions of TCM Chapter 1856. Q, sexually oriented businesses subject to provisions of TMC 1842-050, and R, retail and wholesale nurseries or greenhouses. S, museums, libraries, art galleries.
Okay. And
more?
it looks like there's more. I think at this point, can we just represent that this goes, it's correct that this goes section S through section CCC, correct?
I see that, yes.
And so I'm going to go back to chapter 4, figure 4-9. And what is the gray area? The gray area is labeled?
Aviation related industry.
So,
industrial.
And from that, can you tell which of the uses that you both read and were listed in the following, I think, 27, 28 items would be going in there?
Well, if I could remember what they were, I would tell you, but I will tell you what I believe would go there.
Okay.
Certainly, manufacturing, assembly, maintenance, and all those related things that would go into supporting the airport, supporting what's at the airport. You know, and that could have all kinds of
And
different
what is,
chemicals like solvents and degreasers, and there's going to be probably fuel storage on site for certain types of vehicles. Yeah,
but you
among
say
other things.
probably, you're speculating here.
Well, I'm speculating with common sense. Anybody can sit down and look through that list that you showed me, pick off the compounds, chemicals that would be used for those, and then relate them to aviation-related industrial complexes. I mean, that's
But
kind
all
of a
of those
no-brainer.
uses were allowed in that in an aviation-related industrial zone, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, not all those uses are allowed in that zone, but they could be.
Okay.
It's the question.
So
It's the question
I
of
guess
how,
what I'm getting here is you've acknowledged we don't have enough information to know the footprints of the buildings. We don't have enough information to know the impermeable surface
I want to
area.
object. That's a mischaracterization of his testimony. That is not what he said.
Well, it's more argument, Mr. Henniker. I'll sustain the objection. I mean,
Okay.
you haven't finished the question, so there's probably a question, but
I can withdraw my previous question and ask another one.
okay, could you do that, please?
I certainly can. So is it reasonable for you to say that you know what full build out will look like in the context of the categories we've discussed: amount of impervious area, or what that impervious area is made out of, the footprints of the buildings, and the uses that may be, and the uses that those buildings may be to?
it is reasonable, based on this map, if the port wants to develop that gray area that says aviation related industrial, to make some very common sense assumptions about what would be there and what would be required as impervious surfaces to service that area. Yes, it is totally reasonable. I mean, otherwise you're saying that I mean, if the port really wants to develop that area, I mean, why would they make a map like this unless they wanted to develop that property? And there's some very reasonable assumptions that could be made about what will be there.
So that you talked a little bit about if the pink and gray, and again, correct me if I'm misstating your testimony here, the pink and gray areas were in different areas on the map that would change the hydrological impacts, correct?
No, the pink and gray areas are where they are. What I'm saying is, depending on what you would place in those areas, potentially should be part of the risk assessment to the water resources beneath the airport. And certain chemicals or activities should not be placed in certain areas. It's called, this is called planning level deliberation. That's what I characterize this as.
Okay, but the preferred alternative does not determine what is being placed in those areas.
Oh, objection? That's not what he said,
Well,
never mind. I withdraw my objection.
okay, if you can answer, please.
Could you repeat the question? I got a little bit of a breakup there with the voice.
From the preferred alternative, let me start over. Does the preferred alternative indicate what is going in those areas, those pink and gray areas?
In generally, yes. In a general sense, it does. It categorizes them. Aviation, related industrial. What's the G commercial service? So yes, there is some categorization there.
Do you know if the preferred alternative is what is setting those zoning areas?
Objection. Ask a legal question.
Well, I'll sustain this. I see the point you're
I don't
making.
know. I don't think this witness has provided any foundation to get into the details of the significance of what the port is doing legally when it identifies certain areas for certain uses. If it's illegal zoning, if it's
Well,
I mean, this is,
Ms. Newman, I sustained your objection. If you.
oh,
do you want
sorry,
me-
I thought
Do
you,
you want me to change my decision on sustaining?
no,
your
I misheard. That was my mistake.
I know the point, I'm sorry, I know the point Mr. Maneker is getting to. This witness is qualified as a geohydrologist. He's been involved in things involving planning, but he's neither a lawyer nor a land use planner, as I understand it. And I think, or an airport developer. So if you're going to ask him questions about that, whether he has any expertise in that and has any opinions on that, you can do it. But I don't know what he's going to say.
Okay. I will move on. Mr. Mathieu, you expressed a number of significant concerns regarding just the vulnerability of the aquifer and the hydrological system around Tumwater in general, correct?
Yes, I did.
Do those concerns persist, even if if the airport does not adopt the preferred alternative at this time?
Those concerns are ever present. Yes, but
Okay.
the adoption of a new plan is cause for greater concern.
You recommend hydrological monitoring in your report, correct?
Yes.
Is that something you would recommend regardless of whether this particular airport master plan update was on the table?
You mean if this plan never went to fruition, was actualized? Is that what you're saying?
If just imagine
happened?
that it evaporated into thin air and didn't exist, would you still be recommending hydrological monitoring?
I
Can you clarify what you mean by evaporated into air and never exist? Does that mean that they decided not to develop the airport property?
Well, let me do this. Tell me if this is what you're asking. Or do you want him to say that even if the master plan is not adopted and there was no further development in the areas shown, does he think there should be water quality monitoring on the site? Is that what you're getting at? Maybe I misunderstand.
Yeah, I largely, yes, Mr. Hearing Examiner. I would take issue with linking the master plan update and development so closely, further development
Okay.
so closely.
Okay.
Well, I
But
would
yes,
object
generally
that-
the idea.
I object on the basis this is very vague, and I don't think that the witness has the same understanding of what you're asking as what you're implying with your question.
I can certainly rephrase it.
Try that.
Mr. Mathieu, if there was no proposed master plan update, and in addition to that, at this time, there is no development planned at the airport, would you still recommend that the airport undertake a program of hydrological monitoring?
Well, that's a silly question because the monitoring I'm talking about is related to the development of this property. So if you're asking me if there should be monitoring at the airport, they see and say what's currently being done with the monitoring system. And monitoring, you have to be very targeted with it and intentional. you know, you need to understand the system. I don't understand how the airport currently operates its land and the system out there. If I knew that, maybe I'd recommend monitoring, but I don't know that.
Okay.
So monitoring has got a purpose. It always has to have a purpose.
Okay.
And if this development occurs, there would be some things that I would recommend monitoring. And I'm talking about things like monitoring the quality of stormwater that is detained or retained, and its quality before it's discharged to that QGOS, you know, shallow unit aquifer, and maybe even something in that shallow aquifer. That's the kind of monitoring I'm talking about that would be appropriate for this type of development.
Okay. Just a couple of quick general questions. Is there a portion of the preferred alternative or the airport master plan update that you reviewed, which proposes to introduce the use of additional PFAS and 6 ppDA DQ at the airport?
Okay, hang on one second. I just bear with me for a minute because my connection is getting a little wonky. I'm going to just make a quick change, so hopefully this doesn't cut me out.
I fear that the worst has happened.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna,
He'll be back, I'm sure.
Well, let's see. There he is. You're back.
Okay. Sorry about
Okay.
that.
I can
Go
restate
ahead.
my
connection was-
question.
I wasn't hearing.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Could you please ask the question again? I'm sorry.
I certainly can. Which part of the airport master plan update that you reviewed proposes the introduction of additional PFAS or 6 ppDQ?
In terms of the PFAS, I didn't see that anywhere. I just know that that's a contaminant of concern. It's been that way since probably the late 70s. It continues to be an issue. You know, firefighting and fire suppression is something that's done at airports, or is training is done at airports. In terms of the 6 ppDQ, that did not appear in any documents that I reviewed, but that is an issue, an emerging contaminant issue that occurs in high traffic areas. And if you're going to be attracting more vehicles to this area, you're going to have more tire wear, you're going to have more stormwater runoff on impervious surfaces that needs to be treated before it goes, you know, infiltrated into the aquifer. So I don't know if I answered your question, but.
And you mentioned that injection wells, I believe. Where were those referenced or proposed in the airport master plan update?
They were not referenced or proposed, as far as I can tell. However, anybody that develops a large building or warehouse really likes to use that type of technology, these underground wells.
Hmm.
Yeah, vertical well. It could also be like or
You're breaking
under
up
subsurface
badly.
chambers. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Better.
Better, yes.
Okay. So the UIC wells, I didn't see that necessarily in the documents, but a lot of developers like to use those that technology. I don't think it's an appropriate technology to be using at the airport or actually anywhere in this general region, because it's a it's a potential conduit for contamination to move into the aquifer and cause problems. Problems like I described with my opening
Okay.
about the contamination of Palermo well field.
And you testified that you do a lot of work in Thurston County generally and in Tumwater as well, correct?
I have done the majority of my Thurston County work has been split between City of Lacey and the area around just south of Miller-Sylvania State Park, which is called West Rocky Prairie, where I've been monitoring some wetland complexes there for about 15 years. But I've also worked for the City of Olympia. You know, I basically was involved in the early stages of wellhead protection plans for City of Lacey, City of Olympia, and even a little bit peripherally with City of Tumwater way back.
Okay. So is there a wellhead protection plan in place in Tumwater?
The City of Tumwater has one, yes. In fact, some of those figures that you saw in our report were taken from that, and the city was very helpful and cooperative in providing that information to me.
Okay. And is there a larger water system plan in place in Tumwater?
I'm sure there's a water system plan for Tumwater. Yeah, I'm not familiar with it.
Okay. So again, this is your knowledge as a hydrologist who's worked in the area. Isn't it correct that the city requires review and approval of facilities within its critical aquifer areas?
That is true.
Okay. And isn't it correct that the city prohibits certain types of development within wellhead protection areas?
They have a right to do that. I don't know specifically if Tumwater has. And let me just say that sometimes cities are not acting in their own best interest in terms of protecting the water resources.
Okay.
It's a big concern.
Okay. Let me just review my notes really quickly here.
Recognize your screen is still sharing. I've done
Oh.
that before. Just
Sorry.
wanted to,
Thank you. Thank you for the heads up.
yeah.
Just very generally, is there a portion of the master plan update that proposes an impact to groundwater?
That proposes an impact to groundwater. Can you define that a little more carefully? What do you mean by that? That they're going to impact groundwater, or that they are going to do something that they know will impact groundwater, or what? Yeah, what
The latter of the two. Is there anything in there that proposes a course of action that what I suppose you do not have knowledge of the port, but a reasonable airport planner, professional hydrologist would know would have an impact on groundwater?
Yes.
Okay.
There is.
And what is that?
Well, they will be putting impervious surfaces down in those development areas.
Okay.
And that's going to generate stormwater, and that stormwater will have to be treated, infiltrated, and that's rerouting the hydrologic system as it currently is right now. Okay, you're reconfiguring it. All of those taxiways and runways, maybe there's some development there that is going to require stormwater infrastructure to be altered from the way it currently is piped and plumbed. That's going to also move water around in a way that's different. And so, yes, there will be an impact on groundwater, soil water, shallow soil groundwater, and deeper aquifer groundwater.
Okay.
And cumulatively, again, if you look at the entire property and And if you take into account, I know we talked about this, the new market development, all those impervious surfaces that go in cumulatively could have an impact that's much greater, the whole being much greater than the individual parcels that are developed on the hydrologic system.
No further questions at this time.
Mr. Matthews, Matthew, I either have 2 or 3 questions.
Sure.
Excuse me. The first question is, sorry. The figure 1 on page 4 that shows the cross section of soil types and the well depths that you testified to. This may be a dumb question, but the reference PW, is that for public water? There's a PW number for each of the wells.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
that's a designation, Mr. Examiner, that we hydrogeologists often use for a production well.
Okay.
Okay. Doesn't necessarily mean public. It could be, private well, but it's a production well,
Right.
as opposed to like a test well. TW is often used for test well.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
That leads me to another question. I don't know how important it is, but you had a figure 5 that showed an array of wells, circles, and then an identification of the number of wells in those areas, I think to the west and north, to the east and northeast of the airport site. Do you remember that?
Yes.
When the number of wells are identified there, is that the number of, does that include wells that are active and wells that are not active, but maybe have been permitted or claims have been filed on them?
All of the above. Yeah, we don't know for certain. So that Department of Ecology online database, which it sounds like you're familiar with, has all the well logs that drillers have filed.
Right.
And in that database, and they are, it's not a super accurate database. In other words, there may be more wells out there than have been filed by drillers. You can imagine some drillers don't do the paperwork that they should. But those wells that we plotted there are all water. They're what we call water wells. They're not geotechnical wells, or monitoring wells that are also drilled and also kept in that online ecology database. So those are all water wells. They're probably a mixture of domestic wells, single family homes, small water system wells, that feed maybe, half a dozen folks. And some of them might have water rights and some of them might have water claims.
Right.
And we don't really know. But
well,
it shows that
I'm just trying to understand the exhibit. I'm not suggesting any hidden agenda on the exhibit, but it may also include well logs are also filed for test wells, and well logs are filed for wells that eventually are not used or abandoned. Correct?
Yeah, generally we screen those out. For that figure. I mean, these I think at some point were drilled and used. Like you're saying though, some may have been abandoned or decommissioned. That is true. I mean, I know some people that live in that area, and in fact, I know a camp, a kids camp that's in that area that uses a water well. I identified that one, that has anywhere from 30 to maybe a couple hundred kids at any one time in the summer. So, they're they're downstream of this project, and that's why there needs to be really good scrutiny of what happens on this property.
All right, just so I understand that exhibit, I can go back to it, but is your assumption that all of those wells are withdrawing water from the upper aquifer that you identified on the other exhibit?
They're probably drawing water from the same aquifer that Tumwater is drawing it from, but there might be some shallower water there too. But I would say that it's very likely that area is very similar to what I showed you in that cross section. Except, let me just say that as you get closer to, let me backtrack on that a little bit. As you move closer to the Deschutes River, to the trace of the Deschutes River, there's a very wide floodplain in the subsurface too, that is made up predominantly of like sands, and it does look different from the cross section that I showed you. Okay, that figure 1. But hydrologically, it's one continuous hydrologic unit. So any contamination that would occur, by a release at the airport could very easily make its way into wells that are in that area that you're talking about, these domestic wells and private wells, small water system wells. And it's very similar to the setting that I talked about when we first opened this morning, where you have a system that kind of looks like that figure 1 around I-5, and this contamination release occurred and went into the Palermo well field. The Palermo well field is in that sort of floodplain sand deposit also. Okay. So the hydraulic connection really, laterally from what I would call an upland area into the river floodplain area. Okay.
And as I understand your testimony, as one gets into that river floodplain area, north of this area towards the mouth of the Deschutes, the groundwater that's in some sort of hydraulic continuity with the surface water is generally contributing to the surface water of the stream, as opposed to the surface water of the stream contributing to the groundwater. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. And but let me just add a little flavor to that and say that it's more so in the summer and the fall when we're not getting rainfall. Right. Okay. Yep.
I understand. Yep. Okay. I don't have any other questions. Ms. Newman?
Just a few, Mr. Mathieu. Following up on the cross, is it necessary to have specific projects or specific building proposals on the table now by the port in order to prepare the analysis that you testified is necessary now at the planning level?
No, it's not necessary. I mean, we can use common sense and say, okay, if this entire area gets developed with impervious surfaces, what hydrologic effect will that have? Or we can say, we can make statements like I said earlier. What happens if we use these chemicals and they're spilled at this particular location? Who might be impacted downstream or down gradient? And maybe we shouldn't be putting them there,
Okay. And do you need to assess and disclose and understand the impacts before you can develop adequate mitigation for those impacts?
I'm sorry, you cut out a little bit, Ms. Newman, on the beginning of that. Go ahead.
Do you need to assess, disclose, and understand the impacts before you can develop adequate mitigation for those impacts?
No. You can develop the mitigation well in advance. I mean, that's what planning's all about.
Well, actually, let me clarify. At a planning level, do you need to do the planning level assessment of impacts or, risk assessment, the whole planning level discussion that you've had? Do you need to do that before you can start talking about a mitigation plan overall for the whole project?
Yes. I mean, okay, the sequence would be this. Let me just say this. You would say, okay, here's what we're proposing to develop. Here's what we generally know is going to happen in these areas. What are the activities and chemicals that we might use in these areas? And then does it make sense from a hydrogeologic and environmental standpoint to do that?
Okay.
Okay. What I'm talking about really here is, planning, or what some people call scenario planning. It's not super complicated. It's just basically saying, okay, what if this, then this? That's really the approach that I would take to developing the preferred alternatives. And again, driving the preferred alternatives with that sort of analysis.
When you say preferred alternatives, there's alternatives. There's like many different alternatives. And then the preferred alternative is the one that they chose. That's the actual decision they made. So can you clarify when you say driving, knowing that, does that change how you just described it?
Okay, I would say developing a matrix of alternatives. Okay, and then
Okay.
from that, pulling out which preferred alternative has the least risk with the greatest return on
Okay.
on investment. Okay, that's what I'm talking
Yep.
about.
Okay, I have no further questions.
Mr. Anik, any follow-up?
Um, give me,
You're not required to have follow-up questions.
I no questions, no further
I think you
questions.
both have made your points. So, Mr. Mathieu, thank you for adjusting your schedule this morning and for testifying. I think we're finished with your part of the hearing.
Okay. And Mr. Examiner, I want to say thank you to you for even allowing this testimony to happen on this day, because I did have a scheduling conflict with, I guess, was it last week you guys all met? So
Yeah,
thank you for that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate
Okay.
that.
Yeah.
So council, we're at this point.
So I'm leaving, is that right?
Well,
Yes,
Signing off?
you don't have to leave, but you're not required to stay.
you turn off your camera and mic.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you. I have 15 exhibits, I think, that I have not admitted yet, that there were general objections to. I can give you the numbers. Here's what I would suggest doing, partly because of my scheduling difficulties this morning, is that if I give you the numbers, Mr. Anaker, by Monday or Tuesday, depending on what your schedules are like, if you could give me a short email about your objections to those, because I haven't asked you specifically what your objections are. I can rule on it, but I'd like to hear your objections to those 15. And Ms. Newman, then you could have a day or two to respond if that's okay with you. And then
yes.
I could rule on them by next Friday.
Yep, I think that seems reasonable.
And then we can discuss scheduling after that. So do you want me to give you the numbers that I don't think have been admitted yet that you said you objected to?
Please.
Okay, they are Exhibit 6, Exhibit 7, Exhibit 8, Exhibit 9, Exhibit 14. Unless I didn't let that in today. Exhibit 15, Exhibit 24, which is the article from KOMO, Exhibit 38, Exhibit 45A, although it's authored by Mr. Mathieu, and I think he referred to it today. So, but that's one you can still object to. And then exhibits 47, 48, 49. I think which were part of the appeal statement by Black Hills. And then exhibit 58, 59, and 61. And you don't have to go into detail on the reason for your objections, or Ms. Newman in your responses. If I've reviewed them all actually, and then I'm sorry I'm delaying this, but if you could get those to me by Monday or Tuesday, Ms. Newman, I don't know if you or Mr. Griefen could respond by, let's say, Thursday next week.
Okay,
And then I could issue a ruling on Friday next week. So you would all know what exhibits have been admitted and if anyone's been admitted for limited purposes.
Mr. Examiner,
Yeah.
may I ask a quick housekeeping question? I was looking over my notes from the prior hearing, and I didn't see that exhibits 31 and 32 were admitted. I think they were, but my notes didn't show it, and I didn't hear them on your list, which makes me think they were, but I wanted.
Thanks for mentioning them. I think I admitted both of those for limited purposes. At least my check marks say I did.
That's what
Thank
I
you.
have in my notes also. Yeah.
I appreciate that.
I appreciate you asking me because I lose track sometimes. Assuming I rule on those by next Friday, which is what I need to look at the calendar. That's oh my gosh, it's August 1. Let me tell you this. I've sat through the hearings. I've read your preliminary materials, and as I was telling another lawyer in our office here, if I were in the shoes of any of the lawyers on represented parties here, I'd be. I think my task of doing a written closing would be very daunting, given the number of exhibits and the number of witnesses and the issues. So, given that, we can set a schedule. My view is the legal issues and the cases you want me to look at, and guidance in regulations. You've briefed those already. If you want to rebrief those, that's fine. My sense is that your closing documents, if they could just direct me based on the testimony from the various witnesses to the relevance for the issues that you raised in your opening documents, that would be fine. I don't think you have to. You can summarize your legal arguments. I don't think you have to redo them completely, and I have those in the motions that you filed in the memorandums. And if you just direct me to pages in those, that might make your task a little easier. I don't know if that makes sense.
Thank you. Yes. It
It
does.
makes it easier for me. I mean, I was just trying to think, if I was in your shoes, I don't know what I would do. So assuming I rule on those motions by Friday, and I would do that, how many weeks would you like to have? Because you're going to have a large task in doing a written closing. And
Mr. Examiner,
I know especially the port, I think, I think was concerned about this taking very long and me coming to my decision, but is 2 weeks sufficient or is that not sufficient?
My thought is that 2 weeks is appropriate.
we would ask for 3 weeks if possible.
Let me turn my phone off. Let me look at my calendar. 2 weeks is the 15th of August. This could be, I don't know, this is almost like bartering. We could cut it in half and make it 2.5 weeks, which would be the 20th. It's a Wednesday. Does either party have an objection to having those filed by the 20th?
That's fine with the port.
We can do that.
Okay, let's do that then. I do not know how long it's going to be. I have another hearing in Pierce County that may or may not take a long time. But I think your firm's involved, Ms. Newman. So I can send out a letter on the dates. Is there anything else we need to cover right now?
We had talked about page lengths. I don't know. Ultimately, it's your decision. I'm not going to be the horse on that.
That's a good point, Ms. Newman, do you have an objection to page lengths or?
I would ask that it be not too short considering the complexity of this case. And I said last time that we met that I tend to aim for a shorter brief, but because I recognize the importance, I think it's much more effective to write a shorter brief, but I also think that I don't want to be limited prematurely on it's our burden, it's our appeal, it's our case. And I don't want our hands tied when we have this much evidence and this much, it's a pretty complicated case.
So let me do this. You're all very good and you've acted very professionally. And I think you're aware the longer the document is, the less attention the reader gives to it, no matter how diligent. the person may be. So I will not set a page limit, but I think I hate to use the word behooves. It helps to edit it down a little bit.
Yes.
Sorry, just wait a moment. That's what happens when you tell a receptionist you're in a hearing and you don't want to be just interrupted. So let's do that then. I won't set a page limit. I may do it later, but let's not do that right now.
Okay.
Is there anything else this morning then?
No.
I don't have anything.
Okay, thank you everyone for altering your schedules, and I'll await the statement on the objections to the exhibits.
Thank you,
Okay.
Mr. Examiner.
Thank you very
Thank you very
much.
Mr.
much.
Examiner.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.